Hi there, it's Nicole for Simon Says Stamp, and today I have a Mother's Day card to share with you. Mother's Day is right around the corner, and I just loved the Big Mom and Forget-Me-Nots dies that were from the latest Mothers, Fathers, and Florals release. And so I decided to pair them with a couple of my favorite background stamps from previous Simon Says Stamp releases, and some border dies and other things. So I've got my dies first. This is what started my whole card. And what I wanted to do was ink up my images with some distress ink. So I am using my swatches, and I wanted to share how great it is to have a swatch book, because I would not have originally thought to use my blueprint sketch and shaded lilac together, but they're perfect for the forget-me-not flowers. So it's just one of those things where a swatch book can help in so many ways. It helps you know what you have, and it helps you maybe pair up some ink colors that you wouldn't have originally thought to use. I am die cutting the Forget-Me-Nots and the Big Mom die from some Bristol Smooth cardstock. And originally I tried to die cut it just as it came. I didn't trim my dies apart, not realizing both of the circles for the Forget-Me-Not were in that big flower, which totally ruined the first one. I needed additional flowers anyway, so I just trimmed those out and then die cut those again. Once I have all of my pieces here, so I've kind of got lots of white die cut pieces, I can start inking them up. And I'm going to start with my shaded lilac first, and then go around the edges of my flowers with the blueprint sketch ink, kind of for that two-tone look. I'll zoom in a little bit so you can see it a little bit better. One thing about the Bristol Smooth cardstock is you're going to see finger marks in the ink before it dries. So I like to use a scrap piece of paper to keep my fingers out of it as much as possible. I'm going to be using 3 flowers for my card here, kind of tucked around that Big Mom. Ink those up. I'm going to start with the leaves now. All of the greenery that I'm stamping on my card is going to be inked or stamped with the Shabby Shutters, which I haven't used in forever. This used to be one of my very, very favorite green inks. Shabby Shutters and Mowed Lawn. Again, this is where my swatch book came in handy. Wanted something a little different than what I normally go for, and this is a fantastic color combination. Just ink those up. They're very delicate, so instead of like circling the ink on, I'm really pouncing it onto these so that I don't tear the delicate die cut leaves. Now for the center of the Forget-Me-Nots, I went on Google and looked them up, just wanting to make sure that I was getting them as close to accurate as possible. And so I used a little mustard seed for the yellow, and then for the teeny tiny little inside piece, I'm just using some black soot. And I didn't even bother pouncing on the ink with the ink blending tool. I simply just took the little ink cube and inked it up. Now I took the foam part out of my Misty, and I am placing one of my very favorite background stamps from Simon Says Stamp, and this is the leaves background. And then I'm going to ink it up, and I'm just using my cubes. You could use the Distress Ink markers or other Distress Ink products if you want to, but I'm simply just inking up my image with 2 colors of Distress Ink, the Shabby Shutters and Mowed Lawn. Kind of alternating between the two, just getting good coverage over the majority of the stamp. And then I'm going to take a background panel from Bristol Smooth cardstock to ink this up. First, I'm going to lightly spritz this with my little mini mister. And the mini mister is great because it gives such a fine mist of spray. And when I'm doing this, I like to put my paper right on it so I make sure I get it centered correctly. And then I kind of shut my Misty awkwardly and flip it over. And then I'm going to carefully peel up my inked background, which looks fantastic. It's going to have those nice ink splotches all over it. Now, I inked up my mom and it was way too similar to my flowers, so that's not going to work. So I'm just going to leave that there, and I'll re-ink those here in just a little bit. But I want to do a little ink layering over my background. So I have got the You Matter background text stamp. I've also dried my background, and I'm going to hit it again in just a couple places that I don't think are all the way dry with my heat tool. For this layering, I want it to be really subtle tone on tone. And so what I'm going to do is ink up that You Matter background stamp with the Mowed Lawn Distress ink and stamp it right over the background. So I'm simply pouncing it on with that little mini ink cube here. I recently switched out all of my distress inks for the mini cubes. They work fantastic. They're nice and small. They're easy to store. I have really been enjoying it. I wasn't sure I was going to. I've thought about it forever, and I did recently just switch over. Again, I'm going to center that, close my MISTI backwards, I guess, if you want to say that way. Flip it over, make sure I press it really good, and then lift it up. And my background looks fantastic. You could totally leave it just like this if you wanted to. I decided to go ahead and give it just a little bit more coverage and color, and I started to ink it and realized that text is still wet. So I want to hit that with the heat tool too, so that I don't blend out and really smudge all of my text background. If that's the look you're going for, that would be fine, but I really wanted to keep some of that text. It's very subtle, and it will be very subtle once you go over it with your ink. So I'm taking the lighter of the two shades here, the Shabby Shutters, and I'm inking mostly around the edges of my background and then working my way in towards the center. So it's darker around the edges and lighter in the center of the panel. And what I end up having here is a background that really looks like pattern paper. I absolutely love creating my own backgrounds this way. I'm going to take it a step further and spritz my background with water from a distress sprayer and then blot it dry. In fact, I did that twice here. There are some very, very light white or light areas here where the water did wick away some of the ink. Since I've already dried some of that ink pretty good, it's not going to wick away like it would if it had just been applied, but it's still going to lighten and distress the background ever so slightly, especially where I've just added that Shabby Shutters ink. So there is my background. I'm going to go ahead and set that aside for a second and ink up my new die cut letters. This time I'm only using a little shaded lilac ink over the bottom half of the letter. Very light, not very dark. That way it's going to stand out, especially against the darker forget-me-not flowers and the greenery. Now you can see if I put the greenery on now, it is completely going to blend into the background of the card. It's going to get lost. It's not going to pop the way that you want it to. The forget-me-not flowers and the Big Mom die need to be the focal point of the card. So when this happens, I always like to take a little piece of vellum and cover up part of the background. That way you still see the background, you can still see it through the vellum, but it mutes it just enough to make the Big Mom, here in this instance, the Big Mom and the Forget-Me-Nots, the focal point of the card. Plus it's going to give me a place to stamp an additional greeting. I am using the Scallop Stitches die, the largest border die here, and that's going to give my vellum strip a little decorative edge. You could just trim a strip of card or vellum rather if you wanted to, but I like that decorative edge on the vellum piece here. I think it just adds a nice kind of feminine touch to the panel. I'm going to start with my letters and attach those here to the center of the vellum strip. I like to kind of play around with it before I start committing to actually adhering anything. I have a pretty good idea of where I want everything to go. And then I'm going to use some bling glue dots to attach everything here to my card, or the larger pieces. The smaller, more intricate leaves are really going to need to be adhered with some sort of liquid adhesive because they're just really small and delicate. Before I adhere them, I am going to stamp the greeting. This greeting is from the Simon Says Stamp Thankful Heart Stamp Set. And if you've seen any of my videos, Simon Says Stamp videos, I use this greeting stamp set a lot. It is one of my absolute favorites. I am combining two of the phrases from this, the thank you and then for always being there. And I stamped them one at a time because I did try stamping them together and they just wouldn't get close enough since they're two separate stamps. So I did stamp them separately so I could get them a little closer together, and then I'm heat embossing them with some white embossing powder. I'm going to attach my letters here. Like I started to say earlier, I'm going to attach those first, and then I'm going to tuck my flowers and my greenery around the letters to finish this off. These are so fun. I love these big bold letters. I'm looking forward to trying the dad ones for Father's Day as well. I'm going to put a little liquid glue in the center of the forget-me-not, place the yellow circle and then the black center, and then simply start tucking those around. I tried not to press the glue dots in place too much so that I would have an easier time tucking and layering and adding all these fun little goodies. Now, some of the greenery and some of the flowers are going to be tucked partially behind the letters and some are going to be in front, and that's what's going to really give this a fun look. I'll finish adding just a few of these. Of course, add the centers to all of my flowers. And then I just have a couple more for the right side of the card. This one's going to be more in the front. Now some of this is hanging off the edge, you can see, and my background panel is A2 sized. So what I'll do when I'm all finished here is simply take a pair of scissors and trim off any of that excess. I apologize that my head got in the way. I was trying to line this up perfectly and was having a bit of trouble with that last little leaf. Did not want to stay put, neither did this one really. I'm going to put something heavy on those till the glue kind of dries. Now this vellum is pretty covered up, so I can really put some adhesive on the back of this and hide it behind any of those solid components, and then attach that to my background panel. I'll simply put some adhesive on my side fold card base, place my panel right on top of that, and then I'm going to finish my card with a scattering of Nouveau Crystal Drops in Morning Dew throughout the card design. This just gives it a nice finishing look of some dewdrops on any of that greenery or the flowers. It's one of my very favorites from the Nouveau Crystal Drops. Once that's done, this Mother's Day or Mom card is all finished. Thanks for joining me today for this Mom card featuring Simon Says Stamps and Dies. The supplies I used to create this card are listed and linked below the video here on YouTube. Here are a couple more videos featuring Simon Says Stamps and Dies and floral designs that you might be interested in. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time.